people at the top, know the game. They understand what's coming. They understand how to play it, and they can make inflation work for them. I mean, they actually can get, inflation. The working person, the average citizen has trouble with inflation. Their salary is fixed, and things cost more. Their lifestyle gets worse. People at the top, they can actually root for inflation because they can borrow cheap, and the inflation pushes up the value of their assets. And that's why the wealth inequality is as it is. I mean, that's the whole Cantillon effect. So it's a bad scene. And I hate to sit here and complain about it, though, because again, I mean, I think this is going to come out on Christmas. I want to be positive. I mean, the good scene is that, man, they're losing and we're winning, and everyone's figuring this out. And that's the point of this book. I mean, I want an orange pill. We got 330 million Americans out there. How many people are in the Federal Reserve? Like 50 that make the decisions? Well, we outnumber these folks, and if we make enough noise, we can fix this stuff. And even if we don't make enough noise, intrinsically, even in the marketplace, it's arguable that Bitcoin alone is going to fix this stuff, because if Bitcoin continues to go up in value, it's just going to suck all the value out of the fiat. The fiat people aren't going to have power anymore, and the Bitcoiners are going to have a lot of power. And I got to tell you, I would much rather have Bitcoiners running this country than have all the fiat lords running this country. I know that from the Bitcoiners that I've met, we'll do a lot better under that regime.
Hey, Larry. Last time we spoke about you writing the book was in Nashville. We were speaking on the floor, and I think it was right before the Trump speech.
Yeah.
And you were telling me you were working on something, and you're very passionate about it. You did that very quickly, or was this something that you've been working on for months now?
Well, let's see. Nashville was July. I started this in May, June. And I'll tell you what kind of triggered it. I think I was forced into sitting with my wife to watch something on one of the news channels that was politically oriented, and it was just so horrible, And I had such disdain for both sides of the aisle, and I thought to myself, God, is this what our country has become? Because all these people are arguing about all these issues that just don't matter. And the biggest, glaring, most fundamental underlying issue that you understand, and probably a lot of the listeners understand, is that the money's broken. And I thought, somebody's got to do something about this. And to a degree, people have. I mean, Safe wrote a great book, and Lynn wrote a fabulous book, but they tend to be a little bit more on the textbooky side. And so I thought to myself, well, you've been in the financial world, you've seen a lot, where the bones are buried in terms of the misdeeds of the Fed. I bet, I was talking to myself now, I bet you could write a book that would be unique and that might help people to understand what's broken and how it got broken and how obviously broken it is, with a few of the anecdotes, which are pretty outrageous. And then as a result of that, what we got to do to fix it. And of course, that leads you right to Bitcoin. So yeah. And then once I started into it, I became kind of possessed, and I've really been possessed. And I don't know how long it takes most people to write books, but I probably, like I said, I think I started in May or June, and I'm done. So it's
that's crazy.
It's 250. Well, I don't know. But it just flowed very easily. I felt like I was getting it from a higher power. It was kind of ironic, but it flowed easily. And once you're into it, just get into it. I just wanted to finish it, and it is finished now. It's being kind of edited and cleaned up, and I'm actually dealing with what's a little bit of a high quality problem, but it is a problem. I mean, I thought it 100 pages, and then it kind of got to 200 pages, and now it's slightly over 200 in the text, but there's some, a lot of charts and other things, and I don't know, there's some sections I got to decide if I'm going to leave them in or out. But anyway, it could go into almost close to 300 pages, and I want to make the book very accessible. What I'm hoping for is ultimately I'll get out of just Amazon publishing. I'll get to a bigger publisher. I want it to be on the countertop of an airport, bookstore, and somebody just walking through says, "Huh, what's that all about?" Picks it up, gets on a flight, and can read it in 5 hours, and and kind of gets orange pilled in the process. So that's kind of the goal.
Absolutely. I mean, Larry, like, first of all, it's impressive that you wrote it so quickly, because it
may not be any good, Nico.
when you told me about it, it was just like, I think I'm going to write a book, and I'm like, you should go for it, Larry. You should go for it. Now it's ready now. But what you just said was very powerful, and the reason that I believe it's very powerful is because I think we live in this world where people inherently know the system is broken, but
Right.
they continue to seek a political solution to it, where that's not the solution to the problem. The solution to the problem is the fact that there's a group of people that get to create money for free that everyone else has to work for. And
Yeah.
that completely affects every facet of society. And I think this is something that you dive into in your book. You talk about the healthcare system, you talk about the wealth inequality, you talk about, all these secondary effects that is caused by this broken system, this
Right.
broken money. You map it out. He's in the 1960s. This is where the majority of the American people believed in government. They believed in what the government was saying, and then that has just collapsed, right?
Yeah.
Coincidentally, around 1971, right?
Yeah. It's funny how
So
that happened, isn't it? Yeah.
so, and to me, the reason that's so powerful, that mental image in my head, and I've been traveling so much this year. So you walk past those airport, bookstores, is because the answer is right there. The answer is right in front of you. All you have to do is you pick up the book. It's not voting for the blue party or the red party. It's
Correct.
really opting out and voting with your wallet for the orange party, if that makes sense.
Correct. And I think the other reason why I was suited to write it is, I've been in the financial world. I've been doing this my whole career. I've been a sound money advocate my whole career. And I remember, I have the benefit that you and some of the younger Bitcoiners don't have. I remember what this country used to be like, and it was better. It was much, much better growing up in the 70s and even the early 80s. And it's kind of continually devolved in a bad direction, to the point now where, things are really broken. I mean, when you've got, vigilantes shooting CEOs in Manhattan, there's, and that's just a tip of the iceberg. There are all kinds of problems everywhere. It's very obvious to any observer who does any work that there's a real problem here. So, um,
And could you walk us through that, Larry? Like, some experiences in your life that you say the analogy that you said is like, where and this is an analogy, right? You say you just know where the bodies are buried, right?
yeah.
Your financial background. What did you see? What has changed since the 1970s and the 1980s until now?
Well, probably the biggest one, Nico, was the wealth inequality. I mean, when I was growing up, there were the guy who ran Ford Motor, lived in the same neighborhood as us, and he probably made 4 times what my dad made. Today, he'd be making $20 million, and my dad was just a retailer who did fine. But so the wealth inequality is a big part of it. The financialization, and the rewards to people who knew how to game the system. I mean, I think the book is called The Big Print, and it actually, by the time this comes out, it might be for sale on Amazon in Kindle book format, pre-order. They don't allow you to pre-order hardcover and paperback, and just so everyone knows, the book will probably be out in February. That's the goal. It's written, but I'm in that process of kind of getting it laid out and put together, and I want it to be high quality. So I'm not sure how long it could take. It could take a couple of weeks, could take a month. But anyway, but back to the fundamental premise of the book, it goes that inflation is really what's ruined this country. That when we, at the end of World War II, we were at the peak. We'd won a war. We were a leading country. We had all the gold. We were on the gold standard. It was truth, justice, the American way, and we really believed it. And we weren't perfect. Don't get me wrong. We did a lot of bad things, but boy, we were a lot better than we are today. And what happened is, we let some of that go to our head and started making mistakes. The biggest of which, I think, well, Vietnam was an enormous mistake, which then led to big deficits, which then led to a gold drain, which then led to abandoning the gold standard. And the gold standard wasn't perfect. And as all Bitcoiners know, it's centralized and hard to verify and hard to transact in. But having said that, the problem got measurably worse when we abandoned the gold standard in 1971. And that started the trend towards financialization. And we've now kind of hit peak financialization. I mean, when you have 0% interest rates for 7 years in a row, and when you have quantitative easing, which is massive money printing, When your money supply grows 42% in 2 years, like it did in COVID, um, your financial system is broken. And the notion that we can just kind of put a band-aid on and fix it, that's just not right. I mean, it's like, we've got we got a drinking problem, and we got to go cold turkey. And that means we got to stop creating debt. We've got to return to sound money. And the book talks about how to do that. Now we've got policy recommendations, and some people say, well, hang on a second, you're saying the system is broken, Larry, that's all doom and gloom. I don't want to read doom and gloom. But it's really not, because I also talk about how all the positive things that are happening and the counter revolution that's taken place. I mean, we did this big centralization thing up until World War II, figure out how to kill a lot of people quickly. But the microprocessor has saved us, and is going to completely save us, in my opinion, because we've got the internet and we've got podcasts and all these huge sclerotic, corrupt institutions, like the mainstream media and the federal government, these big centralized things, they're all failing horribly, and everyone knows it and can see it, and they're going to fail. And Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson outdraw the major networks, and so people realize these big broken systems are screwing them. And we're a free people, and somewhat, and we've lost some of it, but we're still basically a free people, and we're going to vote with our feet and push things in the right direction. So as decentralization continues, it's a very positive thing, and networks are really making the world a much better place. And of course, we had the internet and that network, we had all the information networks, and now we've got a decentralized monetary network, which is just going to completely rewire the world in a very positive way. And what I try to do in the book is to take, I'm a newbie, because I literally, there's a chapter just describing what Bitcoin is, which probably everyone listening to this podcast knows. But I want to sell this book to somebody who, knows nothing about it, who's just a regular American wandering around trying to pay their bills and wonders why the hell they feel like they're getting screwed, you know. And so the book is, here's why you're getting screwed, and here's what you can do about it.
So Larry, why don't people see it? Because this is something that has, I spent a third of my life in this industry. I've built my career in this industry. And to me, it's incredibly obvious, right, that inflation is the problem. Like, inflation is the issue. Why can't, what's funny to me is when you hear the politicians, they go on TV and they talk about inflation as if it's like a law of nature. It is gravity,
yes, and then it's greedy corporations, right?
Yeah, that's another one. They essentially blame everything and anyone but themselves,
Correct.
Even though it's government spending, which is the sole cause of inflation, right? So has the world been psyoped because they controlled the media for so long? Now that they've lost control of the media with the rise of X and Elon acquiring it, and you really see the truth seeping through, and you see them seize.
Well, I think so. There's a multifaceted answer to that question, in my opinion. I mean, one, they've been gaslit a lot. Two, a lot of people aren't critical thinkers. Three, the level of pain wasn't as large. Let's go back to pre-2008. I mean, the 80s and 90s, I mean, all these things were bubbling and happening, but in general, the world was a pretty good place. The economy was doing pretty well. I kind of mark the beginning of the end as kind of 9/11. Well, the dot-com bubble, and then the bursting of that, and 9/11, which sent us on a spree to spend $8 trillion in the Middle East on stupid stuff. So that, I think, is where the lies really intensified. I mean, there were lies in the Nixon administration, obviously, but it got progressively worse. And it just, with every step, people have been hurting. I mean, Obamacare was supposed to make our healthcare system better. It's made it worse and more expensive. I mean, there's just absolutely nothing the government touches works, because the people who are in there are corrupt, and they're doing things in their own best interests or in the interests of the big corporations that they're in hock to. And so, the rest of us suffer as a result of that. And so, and like I say, if you weren't hurting too badly, and you're, raising your family and, focusing on putting money on the or putting food on the table and watching the football game, people weren't paying attention. But I think one of the things that's happened, it's pushed in our favor, Nico, is that the problems have gotten worse, And people, when people start to hurt, they start to say, well, okay, damn it, what am I going to do about this? I mean, let's solve this. And so again, that's the point of the book. I'm trying to educate and trying to, I mean, yes, you understand it because you've been in this industry, but imagine you have a job that's not at all related to this industry. I mean, imagine, I don't know what job you might have, but if you're a secretary or wherever you work, but you're not deep into this business, you wouldn't really understand it. You would you'd turn on the TV and you'd listen to what people tell you, and they'd lie to you, but you wouldn't know they were lying to you. So that's been the problem. But the trend is good, right? I mean, more and more people are waking up. I mean, that chart that's in the book that you referred to, which shows how the trust in government. I mean, in the '60s, post World War II, I mean, the trust in the government was like 70 or 80% of the people trusted the government most or all the time. Right now, it's less than 20%. So that obviously shows you that the government's failing, and that's because it was built for a different time. It was built for a growing nation, and when economies of scale mattered, and so it made sense to have big government. But we don't need that anymore, and so it's going to go away. And that's the very positive part about the book. The things I see coming are really fantastic. Um, but the other thing is, it's a little bit of just of a how-to instruction manual, because the average person buying a book in an airport, I mean, I on the back of the book, which I think maybe by the time this show comes out, you'll have the book cover and the book back that you can put in the show notes. But the back of the book basically says bluntly, there are going to be winners and losers, and, and everyone's responsible for their own situation. So, hey, read the book, and you've got a better chance of being a winner, and that's something you should want to do. And so hopefully people will read the book. I mean, I want to sell a lot of them, not to make money, but because I want to see the world get changed sooner rather than later, because I want my kids to have a better world, my grandkids someday to have a better world than what we're in right now.
Absolutely. And I think, and what I've coined it is like it's information narrative trench warfare. And it's really about winning over.
That's right. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Winning over the hearts and minds of individuals and really getting them to wake up about it's not left versus right, the divide and conquer method to distract you from what's actually going on. But one of the chapters names really, really, when I saw it, really impacted me, which is, let's talk about the solution to this. So inflation is the problem. Inflation is causing all these consequences, some of them unintended consequences, and It's severely affecting society. But one of the things that you mentioned is that the solution to that is sound money. But the thing that really stuck out to me is that you make the case that sound money is a moral issue. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. I mean, look, I mean, if I said I was going to give you 10 gallons of beer and I gave you 9 gallons of beer, and you gave me some money for that, I mean, you would say, hey, you cheated me. You promised me 10 and gave me 9. And so, money is a representation of time, work, value, energy, whatever you want to call it, but it's what we all use to make our economy work. And when it's continually being diluted by a system that requires it to be diluted, that's built in to be, credit-based system, then that's effectively the government stealing money from everybody who works, and it's stealing your time and stealing your labor, and it leads to all kinds of perverse incentives. And so, this is not new. The book, I don't go in deeply into this because the book's about a lot of things, but I talk about how this goes back. It's in the Bible, right? I mean, the Lord says you will use honest weights and measures. I mean, so obviously, way back when they were doing exchange and they were weighing things and saying, okay, I'll give you X amount of this for Y amount of that, and some people were saying, oh yeah, look at this. They were using dishonest weights, and saying I gave you the full weight, but they really didn't. And so this cheating concept has been around for a long time. It's as old as the hills. And it's just something the government does. And, we shouldn't permit it. But sadly, we haven't had a collective group of people, and there've just been a few lonely voices who understand this issue. I mean, Ron Paul has always been one of them. More recently, Judy Shelton has been another one. And there are many others. But my point is that, we are very much in the, I've made a lot of noise over the years, but we are very much in the minority of economic thought, because the Keynesian model which empowers governments, has really been dominant. And it also empowers economists and makes them very rich. Empowers. There's a lot of data in there. Most people listening will know this, but it's bothersome to me that Janet Yellen got paid $7 million in speaking fees from the financial industry, right? Including 800,000 plus from Citadel. Well, I got to tell you, there's no free market that would suggest to me that Janet Yellen's wisdom for a 1 or a 2 hour speech is worth a couple $100,000. That's to me just a covert bribe, where a big bank is paying her to come speak, knowing that she's in a position of power to regulate them, or will be in the future, or is influencing policy, and they want her to influence policy in a way that will benefit them at the expense of everybody else. That's exactly the way the system works. And so there's a lot of immorality and corruption that comes out of having this broken money. And the people who control the money, it's patently absurd that we have 12 people that can set the price of money. The price of money is the most important price in any economy, because it drives capital allocation decisions, which then drive the correct productivity, and outputs as a result of, you want to invest in the right things. And so if you distort the price of money, you make malinvestments, and you're wasting money on things that don't make any sense. And that's a cost to society. If we had not had all of the distortions that we've had, we would all be living so much better. If you look at all the technological innovation that's taken place in my lifetime and in your lifetime, we all should be working 20 hours a week. It's unbelievable how much technology has improved everywhere. And yet, because the money's broken, we're all still working like slaves, because we're on this hamster mill, hamster track of trying to stay ahead of inflation, which is always eating us up. It's a real problem, and everyone feels it, from the top to the bottom. That the one difference, though, that I'll point out, and you and I discussed before the show, is the people at the top, know the game. They understand what's coming. They understand how to play it, and they can make inflation work for them. They actually can get, inflation. The working person, the average citizen, has trouble with inflation. Their salary is fixed. When things cost more, their lifestyle gets worse. People at the top, they can actually root for inflation because they can borrow cheap, and the inflation pushes up the value of their assets. And that's why the wealth inequality is as it is. That's the whole Cantillon effect. So it's a bad scene. So I hate to sit here and complain about it, though, because again, I think this is going to come out on Christmas. I want to be positive. The good scene is that, man, they're losing and we're winning, and everyone's figuring this out. And that's the point of this book. I want an orange pill. We got 330 million Americans out there. How many people are in the Federal Reserve? Like 50 that make the decisions? Well, we outnumber these folks. And if we make enough noise, we can fix this stuff. And even if we don't make enough noise, intrinsically, even in the marketplace, it's arguable that Bitcoin alone is going to fix this stuff, because if Bitcoin continues to go up in value, it's just going to suck all the value out of the fiat. The fiat people aren't going to have power anymore, and the Bitcoiners are going to have a lot of power. And I got to tell you, I would much rather have Bitcoiners running this country than have all the fiat lords running this country. I know that from the Bitcoiners that
BitcoinWell.com. What makes BitcoinWell.com different is that it's a completely non-custodial platform, meaning as soon as you buy Bitcoin and the funds clear, it goes straight to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet address. And that perfectly aligns with the Simply Bitcoin ethos of the separation of money and state. Support Bitcoin on-ramps that are self-custody by default. To get started, go to BitcoinWell.com today. It takes 2 to 5 minutes to sign up, and bada bing, bada boom, you're ready to buy Bitcoin.
One of the things, and I completely agree, Larry, and it's interesting. One of the things about Bitcoin is that, like, it's even if you live within the United States and you have the traditional basis, right? It's like this orange force field that's protecting you against all these things that are happening on the sidelines. But there's this very powerful thing that you said in the book I'm not going to directly quote it. I'm going to put it in my own words so that everyone's surprised when they initially read it. But you basically make the case that, America's broken, and that there is an honest and integral group of people within the country that you expect are going to say, enough is enough, and they're going to make things right. So
Yeah.
I read that, and it reminded me of something that you told me many years ago when, I was still in my late 20s. I don't know how you agreed to come on my podcast, but, you told me, and you said, Nico, your generation is the hero generation, which comes from the fourth turning kind of theory and stuff like that. And, the way that I see, Larry, and you were talking about it like earlier on in the show, which was, we're the millennials and the Gen Zers. This is like the first generations with all the productivity increases, all the technological increases, where our quality of life is lower than our parents. Even though the world has gotten wealthier, the world has gotten, you have the same phone as a billionaire, right?
Yeah, no, that's the boomers have been incredibly greedy, and incredibly irresponsible with respect to your generation. I see it in my own kids. I have 3 kids, all in their 20s. The oldest is 29, the youngest is 23. And they're all doing fine. They all have good jobs. They're smart. They're going to be very successful. And yet they come to me and they say, Dad, if the odds of me buying a house, given what I make and what I can save and what houses cost, I mean, it's like zero, and they have no idea how they're ever going to, quote unquote, get ahead in the world because of the way the system is set up. And but what needs to happen is fiat needs to get marked to market. I mean, all the boomers grabbed all the fiat, but the fiat's worthless. The boomers don't know that yet, but they're going to find out.
So who do you mean by what is this group of people that is going to rise up, Larry? Is this going to be very similar to what happened with social media and the legacy media, where we saw this slow transition from, we all believed some of us, not all of us, believed what they were saying, really, like, since the election of Trump in 2016, and then slowly but surely you start saying things and you're like, wait a second, like, is that guy on TV really telling me like it is? And then slowly but surely people start to wake up, and the pandemic exacerbated things, right? They really got a lot of things wrong, right? And a lot of people woke up, and then eventually, before you know it, and I think it happened this year, there was the majority of people are actually critically thinking because they're doing their own research by following the people they want to follow on X. And I think it's a combination of people are sick and tired of being lied to, so they seek alternative information sources, whether that's Joe Rogan, Russell Brand, Tucker Carlson, or following your favorite accounts on X. Simply Bitcoin, exactly.
Right? That's where I go for my information.
So, who is this group of people? Like, who is this group of people that's going to rise up and say enough is enough?
Well, I think it's your generation, and I think it's anybody who has been mistreated by the system, and that's where hopefully and that's why we've got to open up their eyes to it and offer them hope, and offer them the positivity. I mean, you said something earlier that really resonated with me, which is when you're in Bitcoin, it's like you have this orange force field around you. I mean, I can't tell you how peaceful and happy I've been since I've gotten fully into Bitcoin, because, I was kind of fighting this battle on this. I've been fighting the battle on sound money for quite some time, and I was fighting it with a golden shield, which didn't really work. And because they figured out how to manipulate gold and centralize all the things we know are wrong with it. And suddenly all along, here comes Safe, and he writes his book. And then I got a bunch of guys like you quoting von Mises, and, it's like, holy crap, we got an army now that's gonna come out here and fight to make this world a better place. And look, you guys have the most at stake. I mean, I'm at the other end of the generational spectrum where I can see the end point. You got a whole life in front of you, so you want to get it right, and you want the world to be a good place. And the thing is, good ideas spread naturally. I mean, people a lot of people do the wrong things, and there are a lot of things that are bad, and there are a lot of times that are bad. But if you study history carefully, you read it carefully. I mean, there's been, the human race marches forward. We really do. We get more. I think we get more ethical. I think we get more intelligent. I think we've got more technology. We get more tools. We get more efficient. I mean, and things that, I mean, even today, there are things that we enjoy that our grandparents or great grandparents couldn't have even imagined. I mean, I can hop on an airplane and be halfway around the world in 12 hours. I mean, that was just unimaginable to my grandparents, right? I mean, and so and certainly to their parents, it was completely unimaginable. They would have to take a steamship for 3 weeks. So the trends are in the right direction, and really all we have to do, and I think the reason you do the podcast, the reason I'm writing the book, the reason the Bitcoiners that do it make a lot of noise, is we just want to accelerate the trend. And in my view, I want to have a legacy of having fought for what I think was the right side of things. I mean, like as an example, when America separated from Britain at two fourth turnings ago, because, well, yeah, 3/4 turnings ago, because there was actually a fourth turning in World War II. Then there was a Civil War. The third one was America. There were a third of the country, they were actually loyalists. They were like, no, we want to stick with the crown. A third were like, no, that's bullshit. I mean, these people are telling us what to do. They're taxing us. They're living in our houses. They make us garrison these soldiers. F that. Tell them to pound sand. You have to decide. And then a third didn't really know what they wanted to do. They were just kind of living on their farms, not paying attention, from what I understand. And it's kind of like you had to stand up and decide, well, what am I going to fight for? Do I want to fight for self-government, or do I want to live under this crown? And I mean, there are people who believe in the state, believe in the federal government, believe in fiat money, and benefit from that system, and that's fine. They're entitled to do that. But the outcomes that they're producing aren't very good, are they? For most people. And
No.
In fact, they're quite bad. If you dig down a little bit below the level of those of us who are doing okay, my sister lives in a rural community in Utah. She tells me some stories that are just heartbreaking in terms of how hard it is for the average person. So, that to me means that, it's incumbent upon those of us who are aware to try and push for a better world, a better system, a fairer system, and then to help those that we know and care about, in terms of telling the story of Bitcoin and telling why, helping them to protect themselves. I mean, I have stories of investors that I've orange pilled who, are now very thankful that, they bought it at 10,000 when I was pounding the table. You know what I mean? And that's satisfying. And by the way, that's not over yet. I mean, it's, when it's $1 million, people are going to say, holy crap, you were buying it at 100,000. Oh my God, you have a whole coin. Oh my God. Nobody I know has a whole coin, so right. I mean, it's all, I really do believe Saylor's right. It is going up forever, Laura. So
Absolutely.
So, well, you just kind of got to get in there. I mean, I was counseling one of my investors the other day. It's like, well, I put an X amount in, it's a big number. He said, maybe I'd hold the rest back until it goes down. I said, I wouldn't do that. I would just buy it, because you may not go back down. And if unless you need it in the next 6 months or year, or even, or 2 years, really, it'll be higher in 10 years. So just buy it,
Yeah.
That's kind of how I see it.
It's the final trade. One of the things, Larry, that you talked about in your book is a kind of Keynesian economics, right? And of course, as Bitcoiners, we're big fans of the Austrian school, and for the first time in world history, what we saw in Argentina was we saw an Austrian economist elected. He won the election, and within less than a year, inflation was under control. He's talking about lowering the tax rate to 10%. Like everything that the mainstream economists said was impossible happened in a very short period of time. And it actually reminded me this phrase in your book. I'm not going to read the entire thing because you guys have to go out and buy the book. But it reminded me of this phrase where you said the Austrian school isn't ignored because it's wrong. It's ignored because it's dangerous. It's dangerous to the Fed's power. I'm going to end it there. You guys are going to have to buy the book to read the rest. But what do
Yeah.
you mean by that? Could you elaborate?
Well, the Keynesian economics school and the Federal Reserve and the federal government, I mean, they're all thick as thieves. I mean, they're all in the same, in the same camp. And so, if you're a Fed economist, you get paid by the Fed, you get big consulting contracts and gigs, you're part of quote unquote the system. And you get rich appointments afterwards. You sit on board seats, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, Larry Summers, who was the president of Harvard University as an economics professor there, he made $20 million in consulting fees, consulting to Wall Street, when he was Secretary of the Treasury. I mean, before he was or after he was Secretary of the Treasury. So, I mean, the point is that there's a kind of a system of bribes and corruption. I mean, how do these people go to Congress making 200 grand a year and end up worth millions? I mean, it's because they get things from other parties that are self-interested and that pay them to bend the policies and the rules in their favor. And so, the Fed has just totally dominated the economics discussion, and they've tried to make anyone. I mean, the Austrian model perfectly explains and predicts what's happened to our economy since the founding of this country. And the book takes you through that if you're willing to wade through. There are 2 chapters that some people have told me they're kind of the rough sledding, because I really dig into the history. I started 1789. I take you through all the financial developments up to the present day. And if you look at it, the Austrian model could have predicted it and explains all of it. And the Keynesian model is wrong and doesn't predict any of it and doesn't explain all of it or any of it. And it's almost laughable how bad they are. And I've got tons and tons of examples in the book. And yet they continue in power. And the reason they do is because the government supports them, because that Keynesian model allows the government to overspend and have the goodies to hand out, so that when you go in as a representative making a couple hundred grand a year, you end up worth millions. And so it's just a big corrupt. It's like we're dealing with the mob, except it's called the government. And you know what? We don't have to put up with it. We just don't have to put up with it. But we can't be stupid about this, because I mean, the mob promises certain people certain things, and that buys a vote, and the vote might be, it's amazing how little people can get bought off with, right? I mean, okay, send me a $2,000 stimmy check and I'll vote for you. Meanwhile, out the back door, they're robbing you, but many, many times that $2,000 in terms of inflation and other stuff, and yet you'll be bought off by that check. It's ridiculous, right?
Absolutely.
People need to understand what's really happening. That's the problem. I think that the average person, I don't know, take an average. I mean, I have my teeth cleaned the other. Take my dental hygienist, right? I mean, she does fine. She's really good at cleaning teeth, right? She doesn't. I mean, she was bitching about how everything is very, very expensive. I get it. I could completely relate. I tried to orange pill her, but the point is, her view was she didn't. She doesn't think about these things. I mean, this just isn't. It's not her area of expertise. She's not interested in it. She's interested in her kids and her family, and she goes to work and she does her job and she comes home, but she knows her groceries cost more and she doesn't know why. And so maybe she turns on the TV and somebody, Bernie Sanders says it's greedy corporations. Well, no, I mean, that's not really what it is. There's a bigger issue. And it's a little complex, because these people who've done this to us, they're sophisticated. They wear nice clothes. I was just watching Jay Powell this afternoon, and, I mean, if you didn't know better, you would think, gosh, look at this thoughtful, intelligent man describing to me what he's doing with monetary policy that makes a ton of sense. Okay. That's what, if I were a dental hygienist looking at it, that's the image that he would be projecting, right? If you're Larry looking at that, you're going, you're a fucking idiot. You don't know what you're doing. I mean, you've lied to us here and you've lied to us for years, and we know it. So, but I know that because I understand where the bones are buried, and because I've been watching the system and studying it for years. And so I'm trying to give that knowledge to that dental hygienist, so that she will say, the next time some sound money candidate comes around and says, we need to shut down the Federal Reserve, because we do. I'm going to vote for that person, because I think the Federal Reserve is causing a lot of my problems. And I think the odds, the number of people in the United States who understand that today, it's very low, sadly. But if they read my book, if they just critically read my book and think about it, I think they're going to come to the conclusion which I've come to, which is oh my God, this thing is horrible. I mean, this is causing enormous pain for millions of people and has for years, and we're ignoring it. We got to fix this, right?
Absolutely.
Ron Paul tried to do it, and he got a little bit of momentum, but I'm talking about real momentum. I mean, I'm talking about a national organization to end the Fed. Which by the way, I'd be happy to be president of. I'm seriously. I mean, I'm talking about a real movement to return to sound money. I mean, a crusade, so to speak.
I think we'll get there, Larry. And as Bitcoiners become more influential, this year we became part of the donor class, right?
Right.
And as we know, Washington is run by the donors, right?
Right.
We became part of the donor class. As we get wealthier, I think we're going to have more and more influence on American politics. And I tweet this out semi-jokingly, but semi-serious. And I said, look, the job's not over until the Bitcoin flag is on top of the Federal Reserve, right?
Yep.
And we turn it into a museum for crimes against humanity.
I like.
But, we're talking about, like these issues and whatever, but there's also opportunity, and of course that opportunity is big because the beauty of Bitcoin is, just by you opting out of the system, you're defunding their system.
Right.
And you're now joining the sound money team, right?
Right.
And it's so simultaneously while you fight it, you can also benefit from switching over to the system. And it actually reminds me of, a page in your book where you say something very powerful that also resonated with me. You say, having a form of money that is fixed in supply is literally a once in humanity type of event, which in my mind, I'm thinking that's a once in a lifetime, once in a humanity type of opportunity. So could you elaborate a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is Saylor has said this recently, and then Luke Roman said it the other day on Twitter. This is the most inelastic commodity in the world, and let me explain what I mean by that. Some people don't know what the term inelastic means. When the price of any commodity goes up, the suppliers of that commodity will change their behavior and make more of it in order to bring the price down and balance supply and demand. And so, as an example, if the price of gold doubled tomorrow, we would drill for, find, and produce more gold. If the price of oil goes up, then it makes marginal oil fields profitable. And so oil drillers will drill them and produce more oil. So think about that. The price goes up, supply goes up. That's the law of most commodities, okay? With Bitcoin, because you have 21 million fixed supply, it's a very unique commodity. Doesn't matter what the price does, the supply can't go up. The supply just is the supply, period. It's fixed, it's algorithmic, it's decreasing every 4 years in terms of its new issuance. So we've never seen something like this before, ever. There's never been any form of money that could not be diluted. I mean, even gold, which used to be the soundest form of money, the supply grows at 1.7% a year. Multiply that times 55 years, and you've doubled the amount of gold on the Earth's surface. Okay. So, but Bitcoin, there'll only be 21 million. So as a result of that, it's a once in humanity. It's a paradigm shift. I mean, I don't know how, Saylor says it's like fire with Prometheus. I don't know. It's like air flight. I mean, people couldn't fly, and then suddenly people could fly. Do you know what I mean? Or people rode horses, and then suddenly there were cars, and top speed on a horse was maybe 15, 20 miles an hour for a few minutes, and cars are going 150 miles an hour now. So it's that kind of a shift. And I think that what people are missing, and I talk about this in the book too, all the crypto noise, sadly, it's just, I hate it. It's just, Dogecoin, SBF, all that crap is just so annoying and distracting because it's just total horseshit. And it detracts from the one pure signal technological innovation here that these guys figured out, or this person. I tend to think it's guys. I think Adam's one of them, by the way. but you probably do too. They created immutable digital scarcity. And guess what? At first glance, you say, oh, so what? Who cares? Well, when it comes to money, that's a big deal. That's a really, really big deal. And, I don't know. Before Google existed, did anyone even know what the concept of a search engine was? I mean, the internet didn't exist, Google didn't exist, but now, it's part of everybody's daily life. Everybody uses it. Everybody needs to use it. It's a network. Same idea. I mean, it's a new innovation that is going to completely change the world. And I mean, my advice to people is ignore it at your own peril. I mean, I've been interacting with some people on Twitter. People I respect, very smart investors, macro people, and they think it's a bubble. And I just say, guys, you're not looking at don't let the crypto noise distract you. Think about what this technology really is, and then ask yourself, okay, you're now aware of it, so you don't have an excuse. I mean, there'll be people who aren't aware of it today when it's worth $1 million a coin. They'll say, "Oh shit, I didn't know about that. And I'm really sorry I didn't." Okay, fine, but these are true, legitimate professional investors who are aware of it. And I said, how are you going to feel when it's $1 million a coin because it's going there? And then again, how are you going to feel when it's $10 million a coin because it's going there too? Not over longer time frames, because you're aware of it. And it's amazing to me. I was down at the New Orleans Investment Conference. I met a guy named Jim Grant. Some of the older listeners will know who he is. He's written a number of great books. He's a monetary economist. He's really a brilliant, charming guy, and yet he really shat all over Bitcoin. He said, "Well, it'll be money. Give me 1,000 years of history, and then maybe I'll consider it money." And I said, "Jim, when people were wandering around and trying to jump up in the air, and then somebody invented a machine that allowed them to fly, did you have to wait 1,000 years to believe that the flight made sense?" I mean, it was kind of, and he kind of just scoffed at me, and I was just like, "How can somebody who was supposed to be a monetary expert miss the biggest development in the monetary field in 1,000 years?" I mean, like the change from coins to ledgers or banks. I mean, it blew my mind. I mean, I went to Harvard Business School. I go down there, and there's a guy there who's going to go to work for Saylor, a really nice kid. But he runs the Bitcoin Club. He says, "Oh, there are about 10 members." And he says, "Most of my classmates think I'm absolutely, an idiot." And I'm like, "This is Harvard Business School. This is the West Point of capitalism. I went there, okay?" Yeah. And I've written to the dean. I'm like, you guys aren't thinking about this, talking about this, understanding this? I mean, I found this thing and I understand this thing and I grokked this thing and I started buying it at 400 and here I am. I mean, it's like, okay, well, whatever. I mean, it doesn't seem that hard to me, but I had an advantage in that I had a venture background, and so I invested in and watched the internet develop. So I've kind of seen this movie once before, and it's the same. And I by the way, I kind of blew it a little bit in that movie, and I talk about this in the book. I looked at Amazon and Facebook and Google, and I was using traditional investment metrics, the kind of things they were taught to me at business school. I couldn't get there. I was like, how can you pay this much money for this business, especially in Amazon's case, wasn't making any money in the early days. I just, no, I'm not buying that, right? But I didn't understand Metcalfe's law and how networks grow in value, and how I mean, they grow they grow exponentially in value at a square of the underlying users that are added, and so and they're so defensible. I mean, there won't be another Google, right? It just won't, because everybody's there. Why would anyone change? And so, that's kind of what's going on here. And, I mean, Google, I just checked it this morning because I was putting it in the book. Google's up like 9,000% since its IPO, right? Yeah, right. How many investments in the world, in the history of the world, have ever performed that well? Not many. Okay. On a broad scale. I mean, and so, and I miss Google, right? I didn't invest in it because I thought it was too expensive. Okay. Well, guess what? Here's another chance. It's the same model. In fact, arguably it's even better than Google because it touches everything. And Google touches one specific commerce-related search information piece of the economy. Money touches damn near every piece of the economy. So it's bigger than Google. So I really do think that people are going to be shocked what happens here. And as as we've all seen, I mean, some people, I mean, just the fact that it's over 100,000 has gotten a lot of people really salty because they just can't get their heads around it. But I would just advise them to get rid of their ego and bend the knee and understand. I mean, look, I don't have a lot of love for Larry Fink because I think he's a kind of a creepy guy and a fiat master. But I'll give him credit. I mean, everyone knows who I'm talking about. He's the guy who runs BlackRock. It's $11 trillion largest asset manager in the United States. Um, I'll give him credit. He looked at it, thought about it, studied it, obviously had some people teach him about it and said, you know what? This thing's going to work. I either got to get on board or I'm going to get left behind. And he got on board. And I think that thought pattern is going to have to literally occur all throughout the world over and over and over again. And, we're so early. I mean, we're still considered fringe. We're still considered psychopaths and all the other things. There's still a lot of negative thought, but it's starting to shift. I mean, I remember the early days of the internet, and a lot of people thought it was just a joke. But by 78, 79, I'm sorry, 90, 97, 98, you could see, the connections were getting faster. The Windows browser was there. It was point and click instead of green screen. And we're kind of at that stage. When the ETFs went through, that was a hugely positive event. Huge. I mean, I had a lot of people who actually orange pilled right after that because their objection prior to that had been, well, the government's going to just kill this thing. Yeah, you're right. I get it. Sound money. I'm all for that. But there's no way the government's going to let you do that. And but the ETF got approved, and really, now look, we may have a counter reformation. I mean, it's very favorable that the Trump administration is going to be positive for Bitcoin. But if in 4 years we have a blue wave, they may come back and try and 6102 us or do a lot of other things, which is why, self-custody and so forth is important. But, to me, it's obvious. I mean, the dogs are eating the food, and there are more dogs coming every year. And, and the food's going up in price, which is what dogs like, And so it's a positive feedback loop that I just can't see ending anytime soon.
Absolutely. And, and just to kind of add to some of your points, right? Like, realistically, they have 2 years. Historically, what tends to happen is the incumbent party loses the House. So they got 2 years of the trifecta of the House, the Senate, the executive branch, and they have the judicial branch with the Supreme Court. So let's see. The thing is, the uniparty is strong, right?
What?
So let's see. I have confidence with Elon and Vivek in there because they're very competent and capable entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But again, how many times have we put faith in, administration, whatever, just to be let down, right? It's like we've seen this story so many times again. But I want to focus on the positives because we are getting to the top of the hour, and I do want to be respectful of your time, Larry. And one of the charts that I'm looking at here, like towards the end of the book, and something that you were just talking about, which is Malcolm Gladwell's S curve. Yeah. And you make the case that there's the innovator stage, there's the early adopter stage, there's the early majority stage, there's the late majority stage, and there's a laggard stage. Now, I think what most people would think by listening to this podcast, and Bitcoin's currently sitting at $100,000, roughly, give or take, you'd be like, Nico, like it's late. But you actually make the case that we are on the cusp of, we're still in the early adopter phase, and we're on the cusp of entering the early majority phase. So what do you mean by that?
Well, I think that's exactly right. It's the point in time. I mean, Saylor says this. He said he thinks the next 10 years are going to be a digital gold rush for Bitcoin. I think he's right. I mean, we've broken through. I mean, I remember 17. I got involved in 14. I bought a few of them, not many. I bought more in 17. I bought on the dip after that twice, doubled down twice. But 18, 19, it was still pretty fringe, and we had just come through the block size wars, and there'd been forks earlier, and so on and so forth. And then 20, it worked. We took off with all the money printing because it responded to that, and as a sound form of money. But then, the tightening brought it all back down, and SBF blew us up. But it's now there's now almost nobody that's not aware of its existence. I mean, here's a perfect example. This morning I was reading the Wall Street Journal. Nick Timiraos was speaking about Fed policy, and he talked about how whether it was tight or loose was in part determined by things like this, the screaming price of Bitcoin. I don't think those were his words, but and for Bitcoin to be mentioned in an article about Fed policy, I mean, That's kind of an Overton window shift, right? So everyone's becoming aware of this thing. And so, yeah, I mean, the Gladwell model says as long as it takes you to go from 0 to 15 or 10%, it'll take the same amount of time to go from 10 to 90. And so we're 16 years in, and these adoption curves, they do get steep. And I've seen the same curve for mobile phones, computers, PC. I mean, almost every development. I mean, washing machines and, automobiles, any new invention. And it tends to get started and people start using it, the early adopters. But then when it becomes pretty obvious that, oh, this is a good thing and we want this. And I think that's what's happening now. I mean, most people now, well, there's nobody in Bitcoin now that's bought it in the last, 15 years. It's not in a profit condition. So it's working. Even if you bought at the peak, pre SBF, you paid 60 or 70, and we were as recently as 107. So, it's starting to work, and that's just going to attract more people. So, and I think the word is spreading, and people are coming to understand what it is. The FUD around energy and the FUD around Sam Bankman-Fried, those are getting explained away, and I try and deal with those in the book. I mean, if you look at what this book is, I want this book to be the perfect book for orange pilling anybody. I mean, Lynn's book is better. Safe's book is better. Jeff Booth's book is better. But what this is, and in fact, I didn't really even write this book. I just pulled together the brilliant ideas of a lot of other people and put them into, and I think what I'm pretty good at doing is kind of explaining complicated things in a simple way. And so I just pulled all these different ideas together and put them into a narrative, and then told my own personal story to make it somewhat funny and interesting, such that, somebody could pick this thing up and go, oh, I get it. I think this guy's right, and maybe I should pay attention to this, because everybody, most human beings, they care about their future, they care about their children's future, and if they have savings, they know that what they do with those savings will determine the quality of that future, and so this is a book aimed right squarely at that subject, and showing how the system is set up to rob them of their savings. And yet they've got a really great tool that they can fight back with that will then allow them to actually conquer and beat the system. And by the way, as we all conquer and beat it, we can fix it so that all that theft stops. So it's a good thing. It's a very good, positive thing.
Well, I am super excited for this to drop. And
well, me too. I mean, I got to tell you, I'll just tell everybody who's listening, getting this thing formatted and processed and through Amazon, it's a nightmare. I mean, the big book publishers are just, they were going to take 6 months to publish it, a year to publish it. I was like, no, that's not going to work. I want this thing to get out now. So as a result of that choice, I had to go to Amazon. We go to Amazon, and it's clunky. But I'm doing the best I can, and hopefully it'll be graphically appealing. And if it's not, the second version will be I'll do edition 2 quickly and give people a refund if they don't like the first edition. But I'm trying to get it laid out well and introduced, and I really have a hard goal of having it out in February. So
love it. Well, guys, the name of the book is The Big Print: What Happened to America and How Sound Money Can Fix It. Of course, written by Larry Lepard. The preface is great. He has a quote from one of my favorite movies, and I'm not going to say it because you guys are going to have to buy the book.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks, Nico. Tease him.
but yeah, it's a great stuff. And Larry, always an honor to have you on the show. I always loved the conversation.
You're one of the original podcasts that I got involved with, and I've really enjoyed it. It's we share bus rides in El Salvador, and you've been a good friend. So
absolutely, Larry. Well, an honor like always. I think the best is yet to come, and I'm positive we're going to cross paths on the many Bitcoin conferences in 2025. And
absolutely.
Congratulations, you completed this super quick. And of course, guys, this is going to be dropping on Christmas. Merry Christmas, everyone. This is a perfect gift to give to somebody, that the uncle or aunt that still doesn't understand Bitcoin. Get them Larry's book. So thank you guys for watching. Appreciate it. And thank you so much for coming on, Larry.
Yeah, thanks, Nico. Good to see you.